The original Scream is one of my favorite horror movies of all time, and movies in general regardless of genre. I watched it for the first time last October, a few days before Halloween, and fell in love with the unique and original storyline, antagonist, soundtrack, the way it was shot, and the film's aesthetic. Everything about Scream is so 90s and I loved it, but after watching it I never even thought to watch the subsequent Scream films. I just watched the original and left it at that. But this Halloween season I made it my mission to get through all the Scream movies, and it proved to be a chore. Sequels don't always have to be a drop-off in quality. Take The Godfather 2 for example, but I found that the follow-up movies lost what made the original special, and I was severely let down. Today, I'm going to be ranking the 5 Scream films from worst to best and going into detail about my feelings towards them. Sorry if I sound congested or nasally, I'm kind of sick right now, but it's not going to stop me from making videos. Spoiler alert in advance, let's get into it. Coming in at the number 5 spot, I have the original Scream sequel. Out of all the Scream follow-ups, I had the highest expectations for this one. Unfortunately, I found a litany of issues with it. Scream 2 is far less engaging than the original classic. The dialogue falls off a cliff, as does the camera work as well. In Scream 1996, there were these signature wide shots that were used in scenes like when Ghostface was behind Randy at Stu's house, but in this one, those shots were tossed in the bin. They were nowhere to be found, and it makes for a far less interesting movie visually. Since characters in the original Scream were killed off, you obviously have to introduce new ones in the sequel, but the ones introduced in Scream 2 have no real purpose or importance outside of potentially being one of the two killers, like Sidney's boyfriend Derek for example. We have no idea who Derek is, he's just introduced as Sidney's boyfriend at her new school and that's it. No other reason to care about Derek is found, especially when we're suspicious of him maybe being the killer, but that would be too predictable as Sidney's boyfriend Billy Loomis was one of the killers in the first Scream. Speaking of predictability, there's a lot of it in Scream 2. There's a scene where Randy's on the phone with the killer, and as he goes on a rant while the killer is silent, you just know something bad is gonna happen. And boom, it does. Randy gets dragged into a van by the killer and is subsequently killed. Totally didn't see that coming. Another gripe I have with this film is how stale the story gets sometimes. You can tell the writers were running out of ideas on where to go with the story and dialogue, as a lot of it is filler and holds no weight. One of my favorite things the original Scream possessed was an iconic soundtrack, but the soundtrack in Scream 2 is miles worse and less memorable. Overall, I found Scream 2 to be a massive letdown as a follow-up to a classic film. 4 out of 10. Although I don't nearly have as much to say about Scream 3 as I did Scream 2, I found it to be barely better than the former. Neve Campbell and Scott Foley's performances were amazing, and that certainly boosted the quality of the film, but it gets dragged down by the ridiculous turns the story makes, like the scene where Jennifer's house gets blown up for example. How far from the original storyline can you get? The saving grace for this movie, and perhaps my favorite part of it, is the evolution of Sidney and Gale's relationship. If you can recall, Sidney and Gale started off hating each other in the original Scream, but as the story progresses, they begin to become closer and closer, bonded by going through the same Ghostface attacks over and over. Their ugly past begins to get put on the back burner, and I'd go as far as to say by the third installment of the Scream franchise, they're basically friends. 4.5 to a 5 out of 10. The fourth installment of the Scream series and the film that comes in at number 3 on my list has maybe the most creative signature opening scene. It's trippy, bends reality, and makes you question what's real and what isn't. Scream 4 starts off on a good foot. Another thing you notice right off the bat is the glossier and shinier look the film possesses visually. For me, these two decisions alone make Scream 4 more interesting than Scream 2 and 3 right away. As far as the story goes, the film introduces a new set of main characters that actually holds some sort of importance. Jill, who's the teenage cousin of Sidney Prescott, and her friend group share a large portion of the screen time and are actually treated like main and major characters. The plot is far less predictable, and it makes the movie far more enjoyable. There's multiple twists that come out of left field that keep you on the edge of your seat and guessing where the story is going to go next. Scream 4 has elements like these that put it over Scream 2 and 3 in my opinion. 6 out of 10. The newest Scream movie as of 2022 comes in at number 2 on my list. In the first Scream movie without Wes Craven, Scream 2022 or Scream 5 is a reboot done right. Scream 4 and 5 share similar qualities that make them more enjoyable than the original Scream sequels, such as introducing a new cast of main characters. The new characters are developed enough to the point where we actually care about them. My favorite part of this Scream reboot is the allusions to the original 1996 film, such as the characters hanging outside of Woodsboro High the same way they were in the beginning of the original Scream, the party at Stu Macher's house, and the Billy Loomis appearances, for example. But Scream 5 isn't just a homage to the original Scream, it isn't afraid to do things its own way. Usually in the opening scene in Scream movies, the character or characters are killed off immediately. But in this movie, Tara, the victim in the opening scene, survives instead. Also, Dewey, a classic character in the Scream franchise, is killed off. Perhaps my only big gripe with the movie was how obvious the twist was. You knew it was going to be two of the main characters in the new cast. That doesn't necessarily have to be a bad thing, but if that's the biggest issue with the movie, then I'd say it's pretty good. I've watched Scream 5 2 or 3 times at this point, and I love it every single time. 7 to a 7.5 out of 10. You knew it was coming. The classic comes in at number 1 on my list. God, I love this movie. Wes Craven really caught lightning in a bottle with this one. There isn't a more fitting Halloween season movie. Classic characters, classic soundtrack, classic aesthetic, classic antagonist, classic camera work, classic everything. There isn't a single complaint I have with this film. In my top 25 movies of all time, probably. I briefly touched on why I love this movie so much in the beginning, but I'll reiterate and go further into detail now. I love the signature wide shots this movie has. I'm absolutely obsessed with the camera work and aesthetic. At the time, the idea for this antagonist was completely original, new, and creative. The twist, basically unpredictable, at least for me. The character development in Scream is flawless. All of the important characters are fully fleshed out, making the twist and last scene that much more hard-hitting. The performances by Matthew Lillard and Skeet Ulrich, especially in the last scene, are phenomenal. They embody the maniacal characters of Stu Macher and Billy Loomis to the absolute fullest. Their performances are batshit insane. Literally my only problem, and I say that with air quotes, with this movie is that I can't watch it for the first time again. I feel bad for people who don't enjoy or love this movie as much as I do. A perfect film, a classic. 10 out of 10. So yeah, that about wraps things up. If you liked this video, then leave a like, maybe subscribe. I talk about music on my channel too, as well as movies obviously, so if you're into that type of thing, stick around. I appreciate everybody who watches this video all the way through or even gave me a click. I really appreciate it. That's about all I got for now. Again, sorry if I sound nasally, I'm kinda sick like I said. Oh, and by the way, we got new background music thanks to my friend. I'll leave his channel in the description so you guys can go check him out. He makes amazing music. And yeah, until next time, I'll see you soon. All of my own, doing shit solo. You can't come my way.